The year in question. Introduced by Richard Stilgoe.
Thank you very much. Hello, welcome to the Year in Question, a radio quiz in which we lift up the loose stones of history and try and stamp on whatever runs out. Wielding the marauding feet, we have our visiting... Thank you, Terry. Wielding the marauding feet, we have our visiting team, the charming, witty, intelligent, and now 50p less rich, Susannah Simons. And someone who I'm sure is looking forward to the day when he isn't always introduced as mastermind winner and ex-taxi driver, Fred Housego. Though it has to be admitted that Housego is nearly as good a name for a taxi driver as Whitelaw is for a Home Secretary. Also with their feet at the ready are our usual dynamic duo, who are Anne Mayo and the man who proved that you could make thousands and thousands of pints by helping records go round, Terry Wogan. Before we get on to general knowledge, let's find our special subject, which is today the complete history of everything that's ever happened from the creation to the present day. When you know the answer, let there be light. The contestants all have switches, which switch on little lights. These needn't bother you at home, but they help tell the nurse which one of the panel needs attention. We also have a score, which is kept by Francis West Nelson, whose name is usually the subject of appalling jests by me. However, we will turn a blind eye and carry on. Let us try and guess the year, shall we? Yes, let's. I shall read some headlines from the year. When you think you know what it is, switch your light on. It was the year when the last American troops left Vietnam, when Joe Carhill went to prison, when Sir John Pope Hennessy became director of the British Museum. Terry Wogan's light has gone on.
I think I'm right in
saying... Anne Mayo is laughing.
I think I'm right in saying that it's 1974.
Well, I think you're wrong in saying that it's 1974. We will carry on with some more and see if we can get it right. Paul Getty III was kidnapped. Maria Callas gave a concert in London. Susannah Simons got it.
I think I'm right in saying that Mr. Wogan was wrong by a year, 73.
But a year is enough in this business, and it is 1973. Well done. Yes, too much. 1973 it is, then, and we start with a rather special occasion for which a certain young couple had quite a few decisions to make.
Well, it's still really to be decided, the family being such that it's always engaged months before. We've really got to do a little bit of sorting out with the dates, but I think the middle of November. And place-wise, I think it's still yet to be decided.
Who was that, and what was all that deciding about? Anne Mayo's light's on.
Well, it's Princess Anne.
Yes, what was she deciding to do?
Well, she must have been deciding to marry Mark Phillips.
Yes, right, and the actual decision was about what?
Well, the wedding date, wasn't it? Because
yes.
They got married in November and everybody was terribly cross because of the weather.
Which is unreasonable of them in November, really, isn't it? Absolutely right. November the 14th, Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips got married. 2 marks to Anne Mayo. Service was conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and of course Princess Anne didn't, in fact, say, "One will." That's my OBE up the spout.
Now, mind you don't take ours up the spout with you as you go.
In October of the year in question, hundreds of goodwill messages were sent. Among them were good wishes from the Prime Minister, Mr. Heath, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Thorpe, Sir John Eden, Minister of Posts, Lord Aylstone, who sounds like Minister of Weather, but in fact Chairman of the IBA, and the GLC leader, Sir Reginald Goodwin, and the Tory leader at County Hall, Sir Desmond Plummer. What was at the receiving end of all those good wishes? Susannah Simons knows.
Well, was the clue in something about the chairman of the IBA? Could I be right in thinking that when I sat there and listened to Sir Richard Attenborough saying, now for the very first time, ladies and gentlemen, Capital Radio, the birth of commercial radio in this country?
It was the birth of commercial radio in this country. Well done. In fact, LBC got in just before the 8th.
Oh, well, I wasn't working for them.
They were the 8th of October. And the first advertisement on them was for Bird's Eye Fish Fingers. Capital Radio started transmission on the 16th of October. Were you in right at the beginning of
Yes.
Capital, Susannah?
Yes, I will never get over the shock of playing classical music and having a break and hearing "Quack, Kentucky Fried Chicken" in the middle of it.
Did you go on to become a professional broadcaster?
After finding out that Horowitz was finger-licking good at playing the piano. Now, here is a man who had a lot of problems to deal with while masterminding a major building project.
This problem has been overcome by, in the first instance, Mott and Anderson, the engineers, conceiving the idea of an overhead gantry to support both the old and new structures. And after some modification, Mowlem used it in this way. Now picture 1,800 tons of structural steel gantry, 1,000 feet long, 100 feet above the river, supporting many thousands of tons of precast concrete units.
That was Paul Mead, Managing Director of the Civil Engineering Division of John Mowlem. If you think hard about what was he talking, you might be able to guess what he's talking about. Anne Mayo's lights on.
Well, I suspect he's talking about the very complicated way in which they kept London Bridge open while they were building the new one.
Right. Absolutely right. The new London Bridge was opened by the Queen on the 16th of March. The old bridge was demolished and the new one built without the flow of traffic being interrupted, which was achieved by building the bridge in 4 different sections. Now, here is a man explaining why he's going halfway around the world for a rather special occasion.
Well, I enjoy it, of course. I like Australia very much. I really enjoy it very much indeed. It's going to be a very, very hard job, but I love music and I like doing what I'm doing. I'm very happy in my work.
That was the conductor, Edward Downes. Where was he going to and why? Anne Mayo's lights on.
Well, I'm waving my arms about because he was evidently going to Australia.
Yes.
And can it be that the Sydney Opera House was going to be opened and he was going to conduct?
That's right. He was going to be a conductor at Sydney Opera House. Take the fares. It was designed by a Danish architect called Jørn Utzon and finished by Messrs. Hall, Todd and Littlemore and took 16 years to build at a cost of $100 million. But does look jolly fine. In return, we were visited by a lady with the best fashion sense in all Australia.
As a matter of fact, my daughter Valmay was married in apricot and oyster. I was married in bone. We called it white in those days, but it's bone now. And instead of matching things, we housewives team things. Yes, we do. The words change, but fashion remains the same, dear. Today, you might notice, I'm wearing a thigh silk peacock flyaway panel coat, which I've teamed with a lipstick sheath.
Fearsome creation. What was she doing in London? Terry Wogan's lights on.
Well, it's Edna Everage, of course,
Yes,
and
indeed.
Barry Humphries. Well, perhaps paying her first visit. No, it couldn't have been. 73. No.
A one-man show, surely.
What? First one-man show?
No, it was the premiere of a film.
Oh, the one
crikey.
where they
Barry
jumped into the
McKenzie.
sea.
Hang on, Fred Housego.
Yeah, Barry McKenzie strikes again, I think.
They're enough. The Adventures of Barry McKenzie. 1 mark each for that. Yes, well done, both of you. That was Barry Humphries, alias Dame Edna Everage, some of the time, in London for the premiere of his film, The Adventures of Barry McKenzie, which opened at the Columbia Cinema on the 17th of October. The premiere was attended by the Australian High Commissioner and the Economic Liaison Officer of the Australian Commission, both of whom were played by Barry McKenzie, by Barry Humphries. At the beginning of April on Radio 3, a distinguished academic, Dr. Robert Clothier, gave a fascinating account of some scientific research which had been taking place and which resulted in this extraordinary event.
It was with great reluctance that Hillingdon had to break the news to his chief assistant. Allington had, in fact, contracted Dutch elm disease. It caused alarm in medical circles, as it was thought highly unlikely that an arboreal disease could transfer to humans. But there was a gleam of hope. Most people with red hair have a very high phosphorus blood count, and this, along with a copper trace, is apparently the humus in which the Dutch elm disease prospers. It is therefore not surprising when we learn that Dutch elms have a high copper and phosphorus trace content, and as a result, this would confine the disease to people with red hair.
Yes.
Very baffling there, but here's a clue. All is not quite what it seems there. Who was talking? Terry Wogan's
Well, I
lights
can
on.
only assume it was April the 1st.
You're right. Well done, yes. And who was that talking?
I'm not too sure. I think it's a wonderful theory. I remember that one of Turbo's relations got a disease off trees as well. But whereas the great horse Tullier got one off the scratching post in the Curragh, but that's another story. He's not Bennett.
No, not Bennett. Red Housego?
Couldn't
Spike
I-
Milligan. Spike Milligan.
Absolutely right. It was
Was it
Spike
really?
Milligan, yes. Yes, amazing range Spike Milligan has.
Wonderful.
He
Because
wrote...
it was nothing like him.
No, and that was the last 48 seconds of a 20-minute talk that he gave in an interval on Radio 3, a spoof of a serious talk about Dutch elm disease, which Radio 3 broadcast on April the 1st as an April Fool, because that was before this year when every single April Fool story was about an EEC directive from Brussels, and we believed every single one of them as being possible. Even, as far as I remember, the Today programme had regulations for the amount of tread you had to have on your shoes. And at this stage in the contest, the scores are absolutely equal. There was another interesting debut not very far away. The gambling fraternity was having a field day.
The bookmakers made you a 33-1 outsider. They must have taken a caning.
I thought he was the best bet I've ever had.
How much have you won?
I won substantially.
Enough to pay for your party tonight?
Oh, yes, very easily.
Well, it was quite a small party to pay for. No marks for guessing the voice. But why was he going to throw that party? Fred Housego.
His horse, I think he'd had trouble earlier getting the horse called something like gay liberal or liberal, whatever. And his horse had just won. I think it was, oh dear, not the St. Ledger, but quite a big race.
No, sir. No. Terry Wogan.
Well,
what had Clement Freud won?
I don't know. I thought it was a race as well. Are you telling me it's not a race?
Well, it's a race, but it's not Susannah Simon's
It's the
life.
Derby,
He'd just become an MP.
He'd just become an MP, yes, well done. MP for where, Susannah?
Is it Ely? It's not Ely. Yes, Ely.
Ely, that's right. Yes, he become MP for the Isle of Ely, won from the Conservatives in a by-election on the 2nd of July. Here is somebody describing how he discovered a fellow holidaymaker in difficulties.
He'd got a high buoyancy jacket that, in fact, came up around his neck and head. He was looking, I thought, rather pale, and his teeth were chattering a bit, which is not surprising. He said he'd been in the water half an hour, and it's pure Atlantic there.
Oh. Now, I'll give you a clue. That was a Mr. Wolfe, and he was on holiday when he did that person a good turn. What was the good turn? Anne Mayo's lights on.
Oh, I think I'm completely off the beam. I thought it was Stonehouse.
No, but not that far out, in fact.
Oh! Well, yes, I
Fred
know.
Housego's light's gone on.
I know.
Must be Ted Heath he dragged out of the water, I suppose.
No, not Ted Heath dragged out of the
if
water.
it's not Stonehouse, is it somebody being captured?
No, I will tell you.
Oh.
Reginald Perry.
Not Reginald Perry, even. No, it would have been not a pair of shoes left by the side of the water, but a Gannex Mac in this instance, because Mr. Wolfe and his family heard
Wasn't
cries
Lord
for help.
Kagan making for the coast?
Wilson getting into difficulties off the silly eye.
It was
Lord
Wilson.
Kagan swimming for France.
That's right, it was our Harold.
It was our Harold. Well
He
done.
was swimming for France, was he?
What? He fell in the water.
He fallen in the water.
I don't like this game.
Mr. Wolfe and his family heard cries for help from the cliff top, and they saw Mr. Harold Wilson in difficulties in the sea at Bar Point in the Scilly Isles and unable to get back into his boat. So the Wolfe family commandeered a dinghy which was lying helpfully on the beach, and they rowed out to sea and hauled Mr. Wilson aboard, not realising that it was him, and otherwise they'd have... No marks to anybody there, and the Wolfe family go to the mental hospital quite soon. Times were hard in the year in question, and here is how they affected one worker.
I'm a machinist. We'll be a lot short, won't we? So that's why we've got to sign on the labour.
How do you feel about it?
Terrible. After all, everyone's got to live, haven't we? I'm not saying I'm not sorry for the miners. I am. I mean, if one won't give in, the other one won't give in, so what can you do? It's only lots of us people suffering as well. I mean, I'm a widow, so it's going to be hard on me.
That lady interviewed there by Paul Reynolds for BBC Radio. She was talking about some fairly draconian measures announced by the government. What were they? Anne Mayo.
Well, this was after the confrontation with the miners, wasn't it? And, is it going on to the 3-day week?
That's it. That's what I wanted. That is the 3-day working week, which began on the 31st of December. Television hours were shortened to conserve energy, all of this because of the miners' strike. And it's fairly ironic to think that the country produced 97% in a 3-day week of what it usually produced in a 5-day week. And productivity now is much lower in a 5-day week than it was then in the 3-day week.
What are you trying to say?
That a 3-day week now actually might be a look up for some people.
Are you trying to make some kind of political statement?
Well, you're right. Well, you know, it's Radio 4, this, so you've got to try and sort of... The President of the United States found it necessary to broadcast to the American people in the year in question on the qualities he felt a number 2 ought to have.
First, and above all, the individual who serves as vice president must be qualified to be president. And second, the individual who serves as vice president of the United States must be one who shares the views of the president on the critical issues of foreign policy and national defense. And third, at this particular time when we have the executive in the hands of one party and the Congress controlled by another party, it is vital that the Vice President of the United States be an individual who can work with members of both parties in the Congress. And the man I have selected meets those 3 criteria.
That was President Nixon in a rare unedited recording. Who was the man he had chosen, and why did he have to make the change? Susannah Simons.
Well, this was the beginning of Watergate, I think, and it was when Spiro Agnew had been accused of fiddling his taxes or something along those lines, and he appointed Gerald Ford to be Vice President.
Absolutely right. 2 marks. Gerald Ford took over from Spiro Agnew as Vice President on the 6th of December. And this little chap's mother was proud of him. He came from a family which made an extremely determined assault on the top 10 in the year in question.
My heavens, was that all of 8 years ago?
Oh, dear, some of them really should go straight in the rain butt.
Wonderful little person, wasn't he?
Wasn't he? Terry Wogan is going to tell us about that wonderful little person.
Well, that wonderful little person was the last in a long line of teeth, which belonged, at one time or another, to the Osmond family. And he was little Jimmy.
Yes.
And everybody loved him.
Could I put in a tiny caveat there, actually?
You didn't love him.
I didn't.
I didn't love him.
Speaking as somebody who in 1973 came from Liverpool and had fairly long hair, I found the song fairly embarrassing.
I think it was awfully difficult for Mrs. Osmond to love it.
That one went to number 1 at the beginning of the year.
And we complain about songs like Grandma.
Can you... The Osmonds had some other hits that year. Can you give me any of them, Terry?
I couldn't be bothered. Do they have wild horses or something?
No, not that year.
Didn't they?
No, Donny.
I give up.
Very, very wise. I shall read through the sorry litany. Donny sang The 12th of Never.
Oh, and very well,
and
too.
Young Love. And When I Fall in Love,
Oh, yeah.
all of which have been hits for other people before in proper versions. And Marie Osmond made her debut with Paper Roses.
Paper Roses.
Paper Roses.
I remember that all right. How could I have forgotten that?
In the year in question, the theatrical world celebrated a coming of age.
Well, I think anybody would be a fool who didn't admit that one of the reasons for its long run is that it's in a comparatively small theatre. I think if it had been playing in Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, you know, it wouldn't have run so long, obviously.
That was Richard Attenborough there, talking about a birthday. What birthday? Anne Mayo.
Well, I suppose it's the Mousetrap.
Yes, it is, yes.
I don't know what birthday it would be. It's probably
must be the 20th.
not quite as much, I shouldn't
Not
have thought.
20th, no. Anybody, Susannah?
Well, coming of age 21st.
21st, absolutely right,
21st
yes. A
birthday.
mark each, one for the Mousetrap for the home team and one for knowing it was the 21st birthday to the visiting team. Richard Attenborough had been in the original cast with his wife Sheila Sim. The Mousetrap, written by, of course, Dame Agatha Christie, was 21 years old that year, originally produced by Hubert Gregg. It opened in October 1952 at the Ambassadors Theatre. It's now at the St Martin's Theatre and is still running.
Tremendous.
Well, the Mousetrap now, I mean, everybody sends their children to go and see it
Yes.
because they enjoyed it. And as far as I can see, it will be sort of taken over by the National Trust and be a listed play. Now, the chap sounding very confident.
We thought it'd go exceptionally well, but I was very worried crossing the Marine Road. Chris was so far in front of me. I thought I'm going to have to be going to catch him, but a very game horse, jumped very well, very game horse. Crossing the Marine Road, he'd be 25 lengths in front of me. But I knew when he jumped last he was stopping.
Now, what was the name of that very game horse and why was he a star? Terry Wogan.
Well, he was Red Rum.
He was.
And that was the national. And I wish that was that jockey who rode him a couple of times and then lost the ride and then rode him again. And wish to God I could remember his name. Buckingham, is it?
No, Brian Fletcher. Brian Fletcher.
Nearly close to Buckingham. So I've got a mental picture of the fella, but I could never put a name to him.
Red Rum won from Crisp, who came second, and Red Rum overtook him only in the last 25 yards. He was 9-1 favourite. He was owned by Noel Lemaire and trained at Southport by Donald McCain. And he won, of course, the next year, and then he was second for the next 2 years, and then won again, amazingly, in 1977. Marvellous horse. Here is a man talking about how he coped with a very nasty situation indeed.
Well, after the initial sort-out of all the gear, and I think we were a little worried to start with, obviously. We weren't quite sure what was going on. Everything calmed down very peacefully, and it was quiet. We were still. We didn't move around at all. The submersible didn't move, and it became very relaxing.
Now, it's rather difficult to imagine how he could possibly have felt relaxed. Where was he? Susannah Simons?
Was he in a submarine?
Yes.
A little submarine?
Yes.
Was he one of the blokes who was stuck for ages off, where were they stuck? Was it Scotland or Ireland or somewhere? They were stuck for about 2-3 days, I think, and then eventually brought up all right.
Absolutely right. Well done. 2 marks. That was Roger Chapman, who along with Roger Mallinson had been trapped for 72 hours in a miniature submersible called Pisces 3 on the bottom of the sea southwest of Ireland in the Atlantic. And they were rescued after an operation which involved putting down divers with grappling hooks from the rescue ship and hauling the mini-sub to the surface with the 2 men still inside it. Finally, our last question. Well, we always finally have our last question. The big issues of the year discussed in Whitehall.
Raise a cheer, tea is here.
Ah, 11 says. Thank you, Mildred. Put it on the desk, will you? We're just feeding the pigeons, dear.
Yes, so I see. I hope they appreciate it.
Oh, they do. Don't you, Raquel?
We've given them all names, you see? Yeah.
That one with the puffed-out chest is Raquel.
This one I've called Oscar. He's rather wild. He has some peculiar habits.
And you see that shifty-looking one over there on the left?
Yes.
That's Harold.
Yes, well, he likes to sit on the fence. But he keeps falling off because he's always trying to face both ways.
And this one here is Nemesis. I'm training him to dive bomb the permanent Undersecretary's bowler hat.
By the way, Sir Gregory rang. He'd be dropping in to check on those airport jobs.
It's London's new airport, you know. They're opening it next week.
Oh, yes, sir. You know, I still reckon it's daft, though. I mean, building London's 4th airport in the north of Scotland.
It's the nearest to London they could get it, you see, without upsetting any residents.
Have you done the brochure, sir? I mean, it goes to press tomorrow.
Yes, we have, Mildred. How does this sound? The government is proud to announce the opening of London's newest and finest airport at Glenbogie. Although Scotland is somewhat outside central London, a fleet of coaches will whisk travellers from the airport to the heart of the metropolis in under 24 hours.
Name of the show there, please, and who took the leading roles? Terry Wogan.
Men from the Ministry, it was called.
Yes.
Yes, it was, Mrs. And it starred Murdoch and Guyler.
Yes.
Richard Murdoch and Derek Guyler.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, with Norma Ronald, who we also heard there, and also Ronald Badley and John Graham. It was written by Edward Taylor and John Graham, and that was the 100th show you heard there, broadcast on April 1973. That's 2 marks to Terry Wogan. And
Does
that
your
brings
bit of paper say who the girl was? Because we can't
Norma
remember.
Ronald.
Norma
Norma
Ronald.
Ronald.
Oh, yes.
Norma Ronald, yeah. So that brings us to the end of the contest. With the score, Fred Housego and Susannah Simons 16, Terry Wogan and Anne Mayo with 24. So a triumph for them. My thanks to them, my commiserations to the losers, but thank you for joining us. Our thanks also to Libby Spurrier for setting all the questions. From all of us until the next year, which is next week, goodbye.
The Year in Question is produced by Helen Fry, and next week Terry Wogan and Anne Mayo challenge Peter Hobday and Joan Bakewell.